This character was in touch. If I found a website he was maintaining called the Taiwan International Legion, because he was trying to move people to Taiwan to prepare for the next phase of the next hot war, I guess. You know, there's currently a Cold War with China. He wanted to prepare people for the hot war over the Taiwan Strait. And so he lists all his contacts that he gathered in Ukraine, including their phone numbers, on the Taiwan International Brigade website. Many of these contacts, or some of these contacts, were mainstream American journalists. One of them was Holly Williams from NBC, and she was interviewed, CBS, sorry, and she was interviewed about being in contact with him.
Ryan Routh was the suspect in an alleged assassination attempt on former President Trump. I immediately recognized the name because I had been in touch with Ryan Routh for over a year in the early stages of the war in Ukraine. Like thousands of other international volunteers, he apparently went to Ukraine to help. I don't believe that he was fighting himself, but he had put up signs in Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, offering to help other foreigners find places in Ukrainian battalions. And that's how I initially came across him. I spoke with him, I think, once on the phone and texted frequently, and he put me in touch with several foreign fighters. Now, he seemed very genuine and passionate about supporting Ukraine. He mentioned plans to bring in thousands of Afghan and Syrian fighters, which I took, frankly, with a grain of salt. In an interview with the news website Semaphore, he claimed he'd been unable to get visas for Afghan fighters, but we don't know if he was actually in touch with any Ukrainian officials at all. Now, I've met American volunteers everywhere from Syria to Ukraine. Some are experienced soldiers and clear about the dangers they're facing, but others seem less well informed and their motivations can be quite confused. To be honest, Ryan Routh did at times seem fairly naive. At one point, he sent me an audio track of a song he'd apparently recorded about the carnage caused by the war in Ukraine.
Okay. How is he not, a lot of the responses to my reporting on this, while I was able to log into Twitter, were, supporters of the International Legion basically saying I should be investigated by the FBI, or I should be jailed, or we should be jailed by the FBI because we're Russian assets, according to them. What was the nature of the FBI's monitoring of these characters who are violent fanatics, clearly lunatics with violent backgrounds, going back and forth to a combat area, making contact among Routh's contacts on the Taiwan International Legion website that he lists are Azov and the Misanthropic Division, a neo-Nazi group. Why aren't they the ones being watched? In fact,
well, that's a great question. And the answer was recently given by the Biden administration, which lifted, as you mentioned, it's the longstanding restrictions on arming the Azov battalion. So clearly they don't care about the growth of extremism and the arming of extremism inside Ukraine. But again, we just have to be cautious with this guy because he claims to have these contacts. He claims to have the sponsorship of these groups, but we don't know for sure if he actually did.
Well, he may have just taken down their numbers when he came into contact with them.
Yeah.
He would be someone, if I were, actually serious about monitoring extremist activity coming out of Ukraine and coming back home, that I would want to be watching because he had so many contacts and he has this background, as the FBI acknowledged today.
By way of his background, in 2002, as the United States Attorney mentioned, the subject was charged and convicted in North Carolina for possession of a weapon of mass destruction. Law enforcement checks also revealed that from 1997 to 2010, the subject had numerous felony charges for stolen goods. I can also share with you that he was the subject of a previously closed 2019 tip to the FBI where it was alleged he was a felon in possession of a firearm. In following up on the tip, the alleged complainant was interviewed and did not verify, I repeat, did not verify providing the initial information. The FBI passed that information to local law enforcement in Honolulu. By way of his background.
So they just couldn't do anything, I guess. But they were watching him. They had a file on him. He was known to them. I think, in the interest of time, just to summarize the book, the 290-page quasi manifesto that Routh published, Unwinnable War, contains some pretty clear indication of his intent. He mainly is interested in assassinating Vladimir Putin, and he urges the U.S. government to take up that policy. I'm sure there are many people in the U.S. government who would like to do that, who would even like to do that with these long-range strikes we'll talk about in a second. But so far, it's not a policy. He maintains that it would actually lead to the destabilization of the Russian state. He also urges the U.S., in his own words, to instigate and push Russia to a nuclear war and to initiate a first strike, a nuclear strike on Russia. He wishes to burn down the Kremlin. And then he fantasizes later on in his book about the assassination of Trump, and in a sort of rambling passage says he authorizes Iran to assassinate Trump because Donald Trump broke the Iran nuclear deal, which is unusual. It seems like he adopts some heterodox views to other geopolitical foes, but he's obsessed with Russia and has clear violent tendencies.